Good morning, y'all. This is Stacy, and we're Loving My Veteran, and this is Walking in My Shoes. This week, we're going to do a series called Monsters. It is about the monsters that just kind of come into our lives. They come in uninvited, unannounced, when we least expect them. As spouses and family and loved ones of veterans, we tend to think, and it does happen, that the monsters that are there, that our veterans carry with them, are the ones who wreak havoc in our lives. And that's true. Well, we'll talk about them too this week. But we're going to talk about some other monsters as well. I was doing a little research for this, and I went back and thought about a book I read as a child, and it was Where the Wild Things Are. And I absolutely love that book. And, you know, it was so typical when you think about it that we create sometimes our own monsters. We envision them and we imagine them, and as a kid, we in the book, he goes in and he just dreams and thinks about his room becoming this jungle, and now there are these monsters that are hung out in his room where the wild things are. So all too often, and it becomes very typical, and we all do it, we create our own set of monsters. And while we do live with things that are challenging and that are tough, we do create our own monsters. And a lot of that comes from the fact that we get used to things being a certain way. And when we feel bad about something, when something bad has happened, we dwell on that. So we dwell on the fact that people will say, well, I can't go to dinner with my veteran. Because every time we go to dinner, we have a problem. Because this happens. He triggers. Our dinner will be ruined. And we say this every time. So now it becomes this monster that we've kind of developed instead of thinking back to the times that we went somewhere and they didn't. So we add to these monsters as we get frustrated and we get angry and we have our challenges. Every time the challenge occurs, every time we see the negative, we start to envision the monster. And we all have our monsters and we all have our demons, but we take these little isolated events and we say, they always do. They always are like that. One of my favorite Metallica songs is Enter Sandman. And it's about when you're in the dark and nothing else is going on, right? And so as the light of the day goes away and the night comes in, that's when you just ignore the sounds, because never mind that noise you heard, it's just the beast under your bed, in your closet, and in your head. When we have these downtimes and we're allowed to let our brain magnify them, the monsters become very real. And they control our lives. We have to find a way to let our own monsters go. We have to look at things and say, they're not always. You know, those of you who've had little kids, there have been times that your kids say, Mom, there's a monster in the closet, or Daddy, there's a monster in the closet. Come check for the monster. And we've done it. And we're like, there's no monster there. But to the child who's saying, come check for the monster, they really believe that monster is there. And they're afraid of that monster. How many times are we afraid of the behavior? How many times do we get afraid that they'll trigger? How many times do we get afraid that they're going to ruin a dinner? How many times do we get afraid that they're going to act a certain way in public? How many times do we build our own monster that may not be real? How many times have we had a great dinner out? How many times have we gone somewhere and things been good? How many times have we had a good conversation? How many times have we had a good night? Good morning, Rocky. How many times have we had those things go on? But we get in our heads that the monster is always going to show up. And it is human nature to dwell on the negative. It's human nature to see the negative all the time. And because we look for things that can go wrong. It's no different than a veteran perceiving a threat. We perceive where things are going to fail, where things are going to go wrong, where things are going to explode, where things are going to cause them to shut down. And we perceive them, and we carry that same monster, so we tiptoe around so we don't wake the sleeping giant. I can't tell you how many people have said to me, I just have to be really careful because I don't want to wake the giant. But how many times have we gone through and had the good moments? And I assure you, if you sit down and you really start to think, even at our very lowest point, and we had them, right? Even at our very lowest points, there was good. Even at the very worst times we were experiencing, there was good. And it was hard to see that when you're living in it. It was hard to see those moments of good because it felt like there were so many moments of bad. And we create this monster in our relationship. And I'm not talking about his monsters or your particular monsters today. I'm talking about the relationship monster. Right? We create this monster and we make it bigger than what it is all too often because we dwell on that negative, because when we are feeling bad, or when we are feeling like it's always this way, or when we are feeling like here it goes again, we just keep adding and adding and adding. And so this monster gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And we don't know how to stop it. And we don't know how to control it. And we don't know how to tame it. There's no special tool for that. You don't go get some little monster trap like you would a bear trap to get rid of it. What you do is you start changing the way you see things. You reframe the way that you are looking at things. And on those days that you feel overwhelmed, and on those days that you feel like this monster is ensuing all the time, there's some things we really need to do. There's some things that we really need to do to decide, hey, how do we start to tame this? One, when you see that that's coming, and you see that moment is coming, I want you just to stop for a second and say, wait a minute, did we have a day like this all day? Because people will say, well, here we are again. It's been a week. We're in this tailspin. Nothing's getting better. We've gone through crisis mode for a week. Have you really been in crisis mode through an entire week? Every minute of the day, have you really been in that crisis mode? Probably not. Probably haven't been there every moment of the day for a week. But because it's overwhelming to you, it seems like that monster is real. When you stop for a minute and you look at just that day and reflect on a day or reflect on an hour, were you in that mood all the time for the entire day? Was the whole day that bad? Now I'm going to tell you, I used to think the whole day was that bad. I used to think the whole week was that bad. There were times I thought the whole month was that bad. And it wasn't. When I changed my perspective and I changed how I started to see things, I realized that this monster wasn't as big as I really imagined it to be. It didn't control our lives all the time. It wasn't a huge part of our life every minute of the day. For the most part of the day, we had, a little bubbly sailing there. But it wasn't horrible. He may have been in a mood. Okay. He may have been short. Okay. But were we arguing? Was he shutting down? Were we living in the turmoil? No. We weren't. Not 24/7. But I had allowed myself to create this monster. I took the bad and I just kept stacking it up, and I kept forming a bigger and bigger and bigger monster. I didn't take a minute to look and say, hold on a minute. We have good moments too. I didn't pay attention to the good moments. I was so focused on what was wrong. And I think we all do that. We all do that. And we do it in life, and not just in a relationship with our veteran. We do it in life. As the holidays approach, I go back to think about this Christmas. We had all the stuff. We were going to cook this amazing Christmas. And we were at my brother's. And big old Christmas was coming. And we had all the stuff laid out and all the sides made. And they just had to go in the oven. And it was going to be the best Christmas. And the tree was gorgeous. We had seen it, it was plugged in the night before. And we had these very specific plans of how we were going to wake up and have Christmas. Well, in the middle of the night, an ice storm came. And shortly thereafter, all the power went out. Now here you've got, we were visiting from out of town, so we're visiting from out of town. We had two smaller kids. My oldest son got an electric bass for Christmas, like he could play that with no power. Right? And all I'm thinking is, Christmas is ruined. Our Christmas is ruined. The kid can't play his electric bass. Our Christmas is ruined. I remember the family going around and going, dinner is ruined. What did? We loaded up and we went to the hunting club. The hunting club that was built in the 1700s. Right? And it has like a cook room, and there was ice and snow and big old fire and fireplaces, and it was super cool. One of the best Christmases we ever had. Christmas wasn't ruined. But that morning, when we were thinking about all the things that were wrong, the kid couldn't play his electric bass. We weren't going to have the big dinner. All the sides were made. All this was done. Now we're not going to have Christmas, and our Christmas is going to be ruined. And that was the monster. Like, we're never going to get over this. I mean, they were talking like, 24 hours without power. And it's freezing. Our whole time is ruined here. We went to the hunting club. And before long, the people that were in my brother's hunting club started to come. And people that we knew most of our lives, and everybody brought what they had. It was one of the best Christmases we ever had. So that monster that day that started out just growing and growing and growing wasn't a monster at all. Because we changed the way that we looked at it. We changed the way that we saw it. We changed the way that we responded to it. We stopped looking for the bad and we started looking and focusing on the good. And do we do that in our relationships? Do we do that in our life? Do we do that in our day-to-day struggles? Do we look at the good that we do or that happens in amongst the bad? Probably not. People focus on negativity. I mean, just think about this past weekend. Y'all, everybody has seen the devastation that was done right outside of Clarksville. And I talked to somebody who's actually in the group. I talked to Sarah Kim, and I was like, because I knew she lived right outside there. I'm like, are you okay? And she said we were on our way back from the store, and we went to a gas station and hung out for 45 minutes. And it wasn't exactly perfect. I've got this veteran, and I got this little girl, and we're hanging out at a gas station because we knew the weather was going to get bad, and we weren't going to drive any further. So those 45 minutes weren't the best 45 minutes. Imagine being in the van trying to entertain the veteran and the kid. And you know this storm is coming. And while the 45 minutes may have been bad, the video that we all see where the Shoney sign is at the exit, that's the exit to their house. And if they would have gone home, they would have been right there. Now their house was spared. Neighborhoods around them weren't, but theirs was. So they could have taken that horrific thing that was coming, that monster that forced them to be in the car. They drove through the shattered neighborhoods. And they get home and their neighborhood's intact. The storm didn't become their monster. Yes, there was a lot of devastation. But picking up the pieces is a lot of good for other people. They're going out and they're going to help pick up the pieces. We get so focused on the negative that we create this monster that controls our lives and sometimes paralyzes us. And it sets up our mindset for the day and the next day and the next day. We don't move forward because we're so afraid of this paralyzing monster. When we don't stop and look and realize that it's not always that bad. I'm not saying there's not bad moments. I'm not saying that. But you're never going to tame the monsters in your life if you don't learn to control them. And the only way you're going to learn to control the monsters in your life is to see the monster for what it really is. We cannot fight something that we're afraid of. We cannot tame something that paralyzes us. We cannot do any of that is bigger than us. But when you look at it from a realistic standpoint and you're like, hold on, it isn't all that. It's bad. Trust me, I've woke up with those days. It's bad. I spent days in that it's bad moments. We've all had them. It's not a secret. But when you let it paralyze you, it becomes bigger than you, and you can't tame it. And it's that way with everything in your life. So when you're starting to feel that overwhelmed feeling, stop for a minute, for a second, and say, what was one good thing? One. When you learn to look at the one good thing, then you learn to look at two good things. Then that overwhelming monster that is paralyzing you isn't as big as what you really think. It can be bad, and it can be horrible, but you have to learn to tame it, and the only way you do that is to see it for what it really is. And be honest about what you're seeing. Be honest. That monster doesn't have to control every second of your life, and the truth is it doesn't. It doesn't control every second of your life. If you spend a day, just one day, and all you did for one day was focus on the good, let the bad go and focus on the good, you'd have a better mindset. If all you did was take one day and focus on the good, you'd be amazed at how much better your life becomes. And that's without changing anything. That's without developing a skill. That's without learning to communicate. That's without understanding a warfighter mindset. That's without any of these things. It's without any of it. If you spent one day and focused on the good, looking for the little pieces because they're there, one day of focusing on the good, you'd be amazed at how much better your life becomes almost instantly. And I don't care if that focus of the good is you're in a turmoil situation and things are just blowing apart and you're arguing and you're fussing and they're shutting down or whatever it may be, and you get to walk in and you take a shower and you let the hot water run over you and you're there for 5 minutes. If that's it, that's your focus of the good. If you get to look outside and you get to see a leaf change colors, that's your good. I'm sitting here and I'm doing this and I'm watching this. I'm flying up, circling is an eagle. We had a heck of a storm last night. And what do I see? I see an eagle flying. So no matter how many pine needles are laid out and sticks have got to be picked up and this and that and the other, right? If you spend one day looking at the good, that's all that matters. And I like what Liz says. Don't let fear hold you back from experiencing wonderful things in your life. If you want a different outcome, you need to be willing to put in the work. I love that, Liz. And we live our lives all too often when we live with a veteran. We live our lives paralyzed in fear. And I think you just kind of really summed it up for us. The monster that we live with isn't the veteran. It isn't the PTSD. It isn't the warfighter mindset. It's the fear. How are they going to act today? What are they going to do today? What's going to happen today? It's that fear that has become the monster. Who controls fear? We do. let's deal with that today. Let's take today and decide today is the day we're going to look for the good. Today is the day that the monster is going to stop growing and we're going to learn to tame that monster, because today we are going to look for good and not the negative. Are you ready to focus on the good? Are you ready to find the good in amongst the bad? As the weather's improved, I promise you those people who lost everything in Clarksville are doing that today. They're finding the family photo that's buried underneath of the house. They're finding some trinket of their life that got devastated. And they're going to cling to those. Because it's the little things. And it's learning to focus on the good. We need to learn to start seeing things in that mindset. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to look for the good. Don't be afraid to take action. Don't be afraid of anything. Some of these monsters we live with, they're not real. They're in our head, and they're stuff that we've created based on our own past, based on our own experiences, based on magnifying things. And a lot of it's based on our attitude. I didn't realize that. It took me a long time to learn that my own negativity was creating way bigger problems than the problems themselves. My negativity was creating bigger problems than the problems themselves. We all have monsters. And we're going to talk about our veterans' monsters this week. How we can help. Can't make theirs go away for them. But how we can help navigate through it. How we can be supportive. How we can understand it. We're going to talk about our personal monsters, because we all have those too. Carl said to me this morning when I told him the topic was monsters, he said, I've kind of learned to make friends with my monsters. And I'm doing better with making friends with mine. But let me tell you, my monsters and his monsters don't always like each other. My monsters and his monsters do not like each other all the time. So when his come out and mine come out, it is not a pleasant party to be at. And we'll talk about that as we go through the week too. But I want y'all to understand this. Anything can change when you have the will and the determination to fight for it, stick through it, and work at it. I'm living proof of that. Our relationship is proof of that. Our lives are proof of that. Be the change you want to be. And I want everyone to have a blessed day. And I'm Stacy. This has been Walking in My Shoes. We're loving my veteran. I love mine today, every day, and always. And we'll talk to y'all soon. Bye.